You can
take your seats. We're going to get started with tonight's meeting. Welcome to the numerous participants on Zoom. My name is Mike Potter, and I lead our community outreach program here at Valley Water. And I'd like to welcome you to our community meeting for the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. We're here to talk about the 90% design for the flood. I always get it messed up. The flood protection project, and we'll also get an update on the flood management measures project. Say that 5 times fast. I'd like to also at this time recognize staff from our elected officials. Online, we have Jordan Montgomery from the Office of Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, as well as Caitlin Amberin from the Office of Assemblymember Ash Kaura. This presentation includes renderings of the flood protection elements to be built at 5 City of San Jose parks and other sections of the Coyote Creek, as well as a construction update on the flood management measures project. We're scheduled to conclude at 7:30. There are restrooms across the way, hallway there. And the meeting materials that you'll see tonight are on the project's webpage. And Jose will post a link in the chat for this. In the next few days, we'll be posting a recording of tonight's meeting as well at valleywater.org/coyote-creek. We're hosting a second virtual meeting tomorrow via Zoom at 6 o'clock. So if you didn't get enough, if you don't get your questions answered, please come on back and you can do it from the comfort of your home. And the details are also on the project page, which Jose will put in the chat as well. We are in the final phase of the design. We're going to construction in 2025. So we're very excited to share with you where we are and also to get your feedback, which is really important. For those of you joining on Zoom, we'd like you to submit your questions via the Q&A box rather than the chat. That way we can be able to respond to them appropriately. Following the presentation, attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions about the project. And I would like at this time to introduce our project presenter, Robert Yamane, the senior engineer and the project manager.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everybody. Okay, I'm going to give a presentation on the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. So first, we're going to recap some of the past meetings we've had over the project objective, project location. We'll give a little update on, we'll go over the project overview for phase 2 and talk about the next steps. And we'll give a construction progress update on phase 1. I think this slide is not legible from your seats, but each one of those boxes are public engagement outreach events. And so I guess we can just say there's been a lot of public meetings and we've taken a lot of input and feedback from the public and incorporated it into the design. And more to come. So the project objective is to reduce the risk of flooding to homes, schools, businesses, and transportation infrastructure from a flood event equivalent to the February 2017 event. And this slide shows the main things to take away from this slide. First, if you look at the yellow rectangle box, that's the phase 1 project, or also known as the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project, which is part of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission compliance project tied to risk reduction measures for the Anderson Dam. And that is fast-tracked and is currently in construction. It needs to be completed by the end of this year. Where the star is, how do I get the laser pointer? Before the Anderson Dam tunnel becomes operational. And then the second phase, which is the main focus of today's meeting, is the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project, which is the purple box here. And we're currently, you can see the arrow, this is where we currently are. We're in the design phase. we will have the draft EIR coming in June or July this year. And this project is slated to go to construction in early 2025 and be completed by the end of 2027. I'm sorry, and that needs the significance here too. The construction needs to be completed before the Anderson Dam Stage 2 diversion tunnel becomes operational as part of the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project. So this slide just shows the overall project limits. It's 9 miles of Coyote Creek at the upstream end. It's down here on the page. Tully Road is the upstream end, and it goes downstream to Montague Expressway. And we break up the project, or the Coyote Creek is broken into, we call reaches. There's 5 reaches, reach 4, reach 5, 6, 7, and 8. And you can see above the reach, there's a purple or a yellow or both. And that indicates, so the yellow is which reaches have elements that are currently in construction right now as part of the phase 1 project. And then the purple is where construction elements occur in the phase 2 project. And so the flood protection elements consist of flood walls, passive barriers, and berms. The flood walls are, as you know, vertical walls that contain and redirect flood flows, but those can be either steel sheet pile flood walls that you can see in the upper right-hand corner, or they can be reinforced concrete flood walls, such as the lower right-hand corner picture. And then passive barriers are flood wall barriers, but they lay down flat in the ground so you can walk or drive over them. And there's no sensors or electronic. There's no electricity hooked up to them. They work mechanically so that they take advantage of the buoyancy. When the flood water comes, it lifts up the flood wall or the passive barriers out of the ground, and it pushes them up into a locked position, constraining the floodwaters. And then berms are earth embankments. And we'll have some more pictures here of the passive barriers. So, and they're used so that it doesn't cut off access. We're using them in some of the parks to make sure that the access is maintained. On the screen here, for example, is Jackson Street at the Watson Park, entering into Watson Park. And so in the middle picture, you see the barrier right across the street. Well, that's going to be lying down flat and you can drive over it most of the time. Only during a large flood event would it trigger to pop out of the ground and hold back the floodwaters. And one thing to note on the passive barriers, so passive barriers are flat and straight elements. And so when they need to make turns, or if there's grade differentials where they need to go up and down slopes, there's transitions needed. And we call them wiper walls. And essentially the passive barriers, when they swivel up, they create a seal against these. You can almost think of them as like pilasters, but they're these walls that the passive barrier can form the seal against. And then in that pilaster or wiper wall, we can angle it so that the next passive barrier can continue from there. And we have some examples of that here. Here's some more pictures of the passive barriers so you can see. I'll try to point on the screen. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the passive barrier is just lying flat in the ground. And there's a little grate or like a vent where the flood water will go in, and then it raises the passive barrier up out of the ground. And then the passive barrier has a mechanical, like a mechanical tie to hold it in place and for structural reasons. And you can see the walls on each side of the passive barrier, and that's about forms the watertight seal. So we're going to look at the different reaches and kind of zoom in on some of the elements. In reach 4, this is by the Charcot Avenue, basically at the Charcot Avenue Bridge and some flood walls along the creek. And then at reach 6, and we'll zoom in a little bit on some of the, like Watson Park here, but you can see, oh, I should say back. They're color coded, so the green is the flood walls, the pink or the magenta color are where the passive barriers are. And then you can see, it's hard to see on the screen here, but there's orange, and that's a berm. Those are the 3 elements: the flood walls in green, passive barriers in magenta, and the berms in orange. So here is kind of zoomed out view of reach 6 elements. And this slide deck is available on the website, which we'll have later. Looking at, this is also zooming in on reach 6 for the Watson Park area. As we kind of showed earlier, there's a passive barrier across Jackson Street. And then you can see the flood walls. This flood wall here is replacing a sound wall, an existing sound wall, and then this green there is around an electrical utility box. And then here's kind of the existing condition at Watson Park. There's Jackson Street in the upper left-hand corner. And at the, back up one slide, it's kind of hard to see on the screen. I don't know if we can adjust a little bit vertically on the projector, but at the bottom of the screen, there's also a little green flood wall. Here on the bottom, that's the flood wall around the south end of Watson Park, protecting the Empire Gardens Elementary School. Thank you for adjusting. So here's the existing. I'll flip back and forth a couple times so you can see better. So it basically shows up like a before and after. The after is obviously just a rendering. Back. So like I said, let's look at the upper left-hand corner. That's Jackson Street, and that's the passive barrier when it comes out of the ground. In the lower left-hand corner, that is the small wall around the utility boxes. In the upper right-hand corner, this is basically reconstructing an existing sound wall. It's a flood wall. And then a shorter flood wall here around the Empire Garden Elementary School building. And this is a reach 7, kind of zoomed out with the different elements. Oh, and also in yellow is part of the phase 1 project, the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project, or the phase 1 project that's currently in construction. So those elements are also shown here in yellow. Forgot to mention that. So first, looking at William Street Park, you can see mostly there's a lot of passive barriers to maintain the open access to the park. So starting from the top of the screen, you can see there's basically the flood protection elements start at the East William Street Bridge. And there's a flood wall that kind of ties in there. And it turns into a passive, I guess, multiple passive barriers going through the park, mostly adjacent to the existing sidewalk. And then avoiding the highly vegetated entrance here, and then down along South 16th Street, adjacent to the sidewalk, and then ties into a flood wall at the south end of William Street Park. Here's just a look at the existing condition. Here's a rendering of what it may look like. The transition between the sidewalk and the passive barriers is just a rendering. I think actually it's probably going to be, about 2 feet, and there needs to be a little bit of a transition there because of some elevation differences, but it is relatively flat, and we'll have intermittent locations where it's flat. We're going to put a little path between, so there's a nice smooth surface to get into the park. And then here's a rendering of what it may look like when there's a flood event. And then here's looking towards the East William Street Bridge, looking to the west. And what you see here is the flood wall tying into the bridge. And then the passive barrier is in the lower right-hand corner. It's in the down position. And then in the up position, and then moving over to Selma Olinder Park, other side of the creek. Also mostly passive barriers for the same reasons. And zooming in here, so this is just going over the East William Street Bridge to the Selma Olinder Park side. This is by the Olinder Neighborhood Center, looking into the park. And you'll see this is actually a rendering. This sign incorporates the wiper walls, and there's passive barriers in the ground lying down flat. And then during a flood event, they would kind of pop up something like that. I'll just click back one more time. There. And then this is, if you keep going around to the Woodboro Drive, this is the existing condition. This is a rendering with the passive barriers adjacent to the sidewalk. And again, a rendering of, during a flood event, holding back the waters within the park and the creek. And then going further upstream to the most upstream reach of the project, reach 8. Let's take a look in at the first Rocksprings Park, which is in the lower part of the screen. And there's show the existing condition in the upper left-hand corner. And then in the lower right-hand corner is a rendering of the post-project. So basically, there's actually an existing short wall out there right now. And so it's installing a permanent flood wall with a greater capacity to hold back the floodwaters. And then going back to the upper end of the picture here, this is at the south end of Kelley Park. And let me flip to the next slide here. We got the picture. So let me go back. So essentially, there's a flood wall being planned. It would border the residential HOA community there, separating with Kelley Park to the north. Okay, and then looking at the existing condition on the left and the post-project rendering on the right, you can see the flood wall kind of along the property line there. Okay, so this is the website. It's www.valleywater.org/Coyote-Creek. And like I said, these presentation slides are available online right now. You could download them. It also has project updates, past project meetings. You can sign up for email alerts. It has our contact information, my contact information, and others as well. Also, like you said, if you sign up for email alerts, we will be also having the draft EIR public meeting in June or July. So you can be notified of that as well. So for the next steps here, The 90% design will be wrapping up in May. Final design wrapping up in October this year. The draft EIR for public review will be in June or July. And then we'll have a public meeting to go over that as well. Same time, June or July. And then we would have a pre-construction public meeting in spring 2025. With the construction starting in spring or summer of 2025. And then ending construction by the end of 2027. And then we have an ongoing 3 years after that of plant mitigation or mitigation monitoring following the construction. And then we also wanted to give a quick update on the current construction progress of the first phase for the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project. These photos are from a couple weeks ago on Arroyo Way, or behind the Arroyo Way homes. So you can see on the photo on the right, this is the sheet piles being installed in the backyard right along the top of bank of Coyote Creek, and you can see the homes along the right. So we just need a slim corridor to get the equipment in, and the machine that installs these sheet piles, it's called a silent piler. It's not exactly silent, but it is very quiet. The loudest thing is really the generator powering the machine, but it hydraulically presses the sheet piles into the ground. It doesn't vibrate them or hammer them into the ground. Just to give an update, the yellow elements are the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project, or Phase 1 flood walls. And these are all flood walls. There's no passive barriers on this phase, the first phase. And then the areas circled in purple are what's currently been installed. The sheet piles have already been pushed into the ground. This location here, just north of 101. And here's where we were just looking, just south of Santa Clara Street, or upstream of Santa Clara Street on Coyote Creek, are the Arroyo Way homes you just saw with the construction that is currently ongoing this week as well. And then there's the Coyote Creek Outdoor Classroom just north of William Street Park, here in the middle. And then the south end of William Street Park, we have a flood wall going in there as well. And this is a picture of that silent piler machine. So you can see it's a pretty compact machine. It can get really close underneath, next to the bridges, just inches away from the side of the bridge. And yeah, it's been great, actually. Been proceeding very well. And some additional construction photos. Want to say also we have about six different architectural treatment options. So where the steel sheet pile would be in a public area or visible to residents, we're encasing them with a concrete finish, just for architectural, to make it more aesthetically pleasing. And we have different patterns or textures of that stamping. So there's a example of one of them up on the left. Not finished completely, in progress. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions and answers.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you for the audience. All of these materials are available. If you can't quite see them, if you have a phone, you could go to our project page and open that document up, but they're all available online as well. I wanted to, before we go to the questions, acknowledge in the audience Eve Zudi from the city of San Jose, who's our partner on this project, and we're so grateful that he's here with us tonight. And additionally, I don't believe we've had to utilize them, but we have interpreters in the back for anyone that needs Spanish or Vietnamese interpretation for what we've said. Should have said that in the beginning. But I just, for the record, wanted to make sure people knew that. And we will have interpreters available for tomorrow's Zoom meeting. We'll be sure to mention it before the meeting starts. Additionally, this is the formal presentation that you saw. We did do a preview for the board of the Campus Community Association, as well as the Olinder Brookwood neighborhood. We pulled together a group of their leaders and did that similar presentation as you just saw, so they could ask the specific questions related to their aspects of that neighborhood. And then final thing is that we will be able to get together again in June when we release the draft EIR, and you'll be able to formally comment on that aspect of it. First part of the project was an emergency measures project. So this is for the non-emergency measures portion. And so we are doing a full environmental review. And with that, and we have 12 people on Zoom, and we'd love to take your questions now. If anyone has one, just raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone over to you. This one?
Here's another one if you want to give one to Robert.
We have a panel of experts here to answer your questions as well.
So we were concerned about scheduling, community events. We use Williamsville Park constantly for various things, and our big fundraiser every year in September is Bark in the Park, and I don't know if that's been brought to your attention. That would be an issue of scheduling, how that would work out. It's a huge production we put on, neighborhood that draws people from all over.
Great question. Not just people, but a couple thousand dogs as well.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to hand this over to Yves.
Thank you. Yves Zudi, City of San Jose. We did receive the word about Bark in the Park, and we know it's a very important event to the community. We met with the Water District. City of San Jose and the Water District meet every Monday or Tuesday afternoon each week. And this week we talked about that event, as well as some other events that are regularly scheduled in the parks. Mm-hmm. We don't have a response for you right now. We're very aware of it. We're having the consultant for the project is looking at the amount of time it takes for logistics, getting onto a site, building all the improvements, and if there's a window in the year where that could occur to not impact the project. We're also looking to see if there's a footprint of the park that could be reserved, but we're aware your event takes up the park. So we don't have a response for you now. We're very aware of it. We're trying to figure it out.
Thank you, Yves. Another question here in the front.
Well, I just want to second that concern. And one suggestion I would have would be, why not start the construction the day after Bark in the Park? And you would have 1 year to get that section of William Street Park done. I know this may not dovetail with efficiency of contractors, but it would mean a lot to the community to be able to access the park. The other concern that a lot of us in the community have in William Street Park is that this kind of trenching that the passive barriers would require will completely destroy the irrigation system. And so we're concerned about, is the water district going to replace the irrigation system or repair it? And also, we don't want the corner cut off, that corner of 16th and William Street, where we have a flower garden and so on. We don't want the irrigation cut off there, but it will take careful planning to get that done. The third thing about irrigation is that on these wiper walls, when we saw some renderings a year, 18 months ago, we saw that actually you could make planters in the top of them. Now that would be ideal, but again, it would have to have irrigation. So, and maintenance, we would like to see something as aesthetic as possible and not just industrial.
Those three questions, those are three good ones.
Yeah, so on the first one, yeah, definitely, like we said, we're trying to accommodate the Bark in the Park in September. We're working on that, looking into it. The second one about the irrigation, absolutely, we know the irrigation needs to go to that corner. So that would be re-hooked up. And certain, yeah, the irrigation would be in the excavation of the installation for the passive area in that location. And so we'll reconstruct the irrigation for that corner. And
But the irrigation for the whole park, because I understand the main access line is along the sidewalk.
yeah, for the entire park.
The
Yeah,
entire
we're
park.
not gonna jeopardize the existing irrigation system.
Wonder too if.
Nobody on Zoom can hear you, so use the mic.
I wonder too about the use of gravel on that piece along the sidewalk. So gravel has a habit of traveling with people hitting it. I'm wondering if park pack or something like that, or decomposed granite, might be a better solution for that. I don't know.
Yeah, we're looking into it. That's not final as a rendering, but we're trying to look at something where it's maybe set into that like concrete. So it's not gonna be a maintenance issue or end up all over the place. Not loose gravel. The third, thing, okay. And then the third one about the, Yves, do you want to make a comment about the air, planters vegetation at the top of the passive barriers?
So I'm here because I love a good night meeting, but I'm really here because I'm with the city of San Jose, the Parks Department. Valley Water and the city have been partners for many, many years. We've built many trails in the city through the partnership, but that partnership has not been because we give things away. Our relationship in this project has been the same with other projects. We have an expectation that Valley Water can use chartered, protected parkland if the improvements are kept to a minimum and we have good visibility into the parks. We have the least amount of footprint impact and we have good aesthetics with this project. We're not going to find support from the director of Parks and Rec to stand in front of the council and say, I've approved with this project and have the irrigation damaged. The whole plan review includes looking at all those parts and pieces.
Right.
We're also very aware of being an agency that never has quite enough resources. You'll hear this from every government agency. The planter idea looked good. We just don't have experience in being successful with that type of installation. So our focus now is looking at the rock material that's found in that gateway to the park and replicating it on the walls so they all feel aesthetically like they belong in the same place. And the Valley Water design is radically different than what I saw 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember seeing some familiar faces here when we saw it. The berms are gone. The angle as it comes into the park avoids that whole landscape area because that's what we heard. So there's a lot of effort made to minimize footprints in this project.
Thank you, Eve. We have a question over here.
Before we beat the Bark in the Park to death, I'm going to jump in too. I'm on the Bark committee. I'm in charge of park layout and all of the vendors' access. So I wanted to make you aware also that there's an access road that goes down by where that last house is on 16th Street and curls around behind the
Barbara?
trees. And that's crucial to allowing our vendors access to the park, because of course the city doesn't want our vendors and their trucks and cars driving across the park. So it's somewhere back by where down by the green line. And I'm not exactly sure where that access road is, but then it goes along the edge before the ground drops down into the creek. And having access to that access road is really crucial to Bark. One point, and then I have a question about that area also. When I've been walking by the park recently, there's a big area that's got fencing that's all closed off. And I think that's down where that access road is.
And so none of us seem to know in the neighborhood what that's roped off for, how long that's going to be there. Is that going on in perpetuity until the project's done? Because that has a big impact on Bark and the access road.
Great question.
Thank you. That's currently, the current fencing there is for the phase one work that's happening, on the right hand of that green wall. There's a wall that goes parallel with Coyote Creek. Further down,
Right.
starting from there and going down, south along Coyote Creek. That wall is being constructed right now. So the fencing is up until that's completed.
Of a time for that
Well, up in
frame?
For October?
end of September, but could be completed earlier.
Thank you.
It's an impact.
Thank you. We'll take that as a to do.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jean-Marie White. I'm a neighbor here on South 16th. My question is really to the city, and I'm taking advantage of this meeting to ask because we don't get a meeting with the city. But this is related to the storm drains. My understanding is part of the flood, during the flood, the water was backwashing up the storm drains because the flats weren't operational, and I understand that this needs to be fixed, but I'm not sure. We recently asked the city and they came back with 1 million documents and pages, and it wasn't clear to me, like, is this a yes, this is gonna get fixed or not?
I'll get your phone number and I'll do some investigating. I am in the Parks Department, so I don't have oversight of the floodgates, but I'll see what I can find out. I'll see if we can translate what this into.
I think we might have a Valley Water answer. They've been interacting with the agency.
Yeah, I just have a little bit, Madhu Tumbaluru, Capital Engineering Manager. So we are working with some folks at the city. We're looking into the floodgates, which had issues during the 2017 flood and which might have impact like after this project is completed. So we identified which locations needs to have new floodgates. So we're working with the city to kind of like make those as part of our future next phase project. Yeah, phase 2 project.
That's gonna be part of phase 2.
Yes, yeah, part of phase 1, phase 2 project.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's a great question. And Jose, do you have some on Zoom?
Yeah, we have 2 questions on Zoom.
You need to use a microphone though.
The first question we have is, when there is a flood event, what prevents the neighborhood from getting flooded by water coming up through the storm drains? Like happened in the last flood. Similar to what was asked. We should have about 3 questions related to the same thing. The topic, I should say. I believe that was addressed already.
Terrific. Yes, I think we're working with them, and I think that we're going to address that as part of the
Phase 2 project.
phase 2 of the
correct?
project.
Correct.
Yes, all right.
Any other questions on Zoom?
Yeah, let's see here. Next question is, along Arroyo Way, will those houses be looking at a big metal wall instead of the creek forever? How will wildlife deal with the big metal wall?
So we are going to be putting an architectural treatment on those walls. So actually it's going to have pigment added to it as well. So it's not just, the gray concrete, more for humans, I mean, but at least we're cognizant of it's in a residential setting, and it's going to have a nice colored concrete finish with an architectural finish on it. For those homes, it's going to have kind of a natural, it's kind of mimicking like a rock pattern. And I guess I can't speak for the
And
wildlife.
that's actually being framed right now. So if anyone in the neighborhood wants to go see it, they could go by on Arroyo Way and look down and see.
Look from the street.
From the street, yes, absolutely, from the street only. But you can see it from the street, so which is one of the reasons treatment's being installed. Okay, we've got a question in the back here.
These passive barriers look really amazing. Do they have a track record? The rendering shows a father and daughter having a leisurely stroll along the sidewalk while we have the passive barriers holding back a 4-foot huge swimming pool encompassing all of William Street Park. Is that realistic? I mean, yeah, they probably wouldn't be out walking, but in terms of is there a track record with these passive barriers performing like that?
Fantastic question. These are
On the-
used in many.
And some of the locations where they've been installed, do you remember? Yeah,
Can you put up the slide that shows the barriers? That one with the 5 different.
Yeah, we have been in contact with the manufacturers. We've been talking to the manufacturers like quite a lot. So these do work. We saw like several pictures where shows up in action. Basically, when there was a huge flood, it popped up automatically and there were no issues. And after we install it, we'll also do the water testing. Basically, we create a pool right behind a portion of the passive barrier, make sure it pops up when the water gets under. So
These are used in places like New York City where there are underground parking garages. And so they're at the entrance to the underground parking. And they are used in, especially after Storm Sandy, these are, cars drive over it all the time and then they pop up when they activate. That's a mechanical activation.
Yeah.
So it just, when the water gets into that grate, the arm goes up.
yeah,
This does look a little bit like a tidal wave. So you're not wrong it probably shouldn't be there if it's that high.
not only in New York, like even here with Valley Water, we recently used it on one of our projects. Yeah, it's called like Lower Kelley Creek in Milpitas. So we did install this massive barrier there.
You have a Zoom question?
and
Vincent?
we tested it as well, right? We took basically like a fire hose and filled it up. And then made sure it deployed and was holding back the water.
Can anyone take a video? That would be.
Yes, we do have a video of that. Maybe we can put it up on our project website. Good idea.
This hasn't gone out to bid yet, so just video is how one would operate, but it may not be that exact one that gets selected to use here.
Correct.
So just we were looking to do they have a model to bring out and show in the park. But that would be working with one vendor and we haven't put it out to bid. You've got a question right here?
Okay, is this working?
Let's test it.
I'm sorry I was a few minutes late, but I'm not sure if this was discussed, but I didn't hear much about the other project objectives. Like enhancing the creek habitat and health, improvements to water quality, creation of a self-sufficient natural system. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about what's being done on those objectives.
So for phase 2, right? Do we want to have Andrew? Well, we can talk about that. We will be having a draft EIR meeting in June where you'll be for the public comment period as well.
I think this should be more important.
Yeah. Before Andrew speaks up, like he's our environmental planner, I just have a couple of things to answer to that question. So as far as water quality for the phase 1 project, right before the project started, we removed about 500 tons of trash from the project area, which kind of improves the water quality in a way. And for phase 2 also, like we have to do the same thing. And quantity could be like higher or lower than that 500 tons. So I'll let Andrew speak about that.
Hi, thanks for that question. I think the best way to address this is, we have to go through a permitting process. City is, removing some trees and habitat along the creek. We were required to go through a permitting process and for those impacts to return in function and values of the stream. Where there's been temporary or permanent disturbance. So, for the flood walls themselves, you're changing the flow and the function of the creek. And unfortunately, that's a necessary change in order to flooding. But where there's an opportunity to protect the habitat, we're doing that, and through the permitting process with agencies that are in charge of water quality and natural resources, fish, wildlife, where we are consulting with those agencies. It's necessary for the terms of the permits. I hope that answers your question.
It sounds more like mitigation than, and it sounds more like mitigation than an actual objective.
Well, I could hand it over to the engineer. Sorry, did you want to ask something else? Because I
Hold it closer.
We can hear you. Sorry.
Did you hear what I said?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it? 'Cause
I
I'm
just
like-
said it sounds just more like normal mitigation rather than an objective of anything proactive being done by the project.
Well, as I am not an engineer, I don't, the projects have certain engineering objectives. And I think maybe the team could speak better to that. And so I can pass it over to whoever wants to take that.
I think the flood walls, they're intentionally being kept as far away as from the creek, basically riparian corridor. So, and we're using the techniques that can mitigate the disturbance to the riparian areas. So that's the way we're kind of like treating it as an objective. So, and that's the same thing we're following for phase one. We did the same thing, trying to keep all the flood walls as far away from the creek as possible and minimize the disturbance in the riparian area.
Jose has a follow-up on that, on a Zoom question.
Yes. Yes, so question here. Thank you for the presentation. I'm concerned about the temporary pop-up wall in William Street Park and elsewhere. Does it simply lay down until needed? Won't there be damage from the sun and other weather? What measures will be taken to prevent and repair vandalism?
Yeah, these ones have been tested like quite a lot, and they even use it on the highways, like across the highways and across the roadways. So they are really, really durable and they can tolerate like the big trucks that you generally see on the highways too. So, yeah. And
Valley Water will do the periodic maintenance to ensure that it's operational.
yes, yeah. Oh, Valley Water will probably check it annually to make sure it's, everything is there and make sure it pops up like whenever it's supposed to pop up. So that's part of our routine maintenance program.
I have a couple more questions related to the backflows. I'll just go ahead and read them, even though we already answered them. Have all stormwater outlets in the creek been outfitted with flat valves to prevent backflow into the neighborhoods as far away as Five Wounds Church? It doesn't make any sense building walls if you allow water to sneak around the walls through the storm system.
Yeah, Jose, that's the same question. Yeah.
Maybe as a follow-up to that, Robert, when they're installing these sheet piles and they encounter a storm drain, is there a way to address that? They cut a hole in the sheet pile? Do they reroute the storm sewer? How do they do that?
Yeah, the storm drains are typically deep enough in the ground, and so the sheet piles right where the storm drain pipe goes underneath the wall, the sheet pile flood wall is shallower. And the sheet piles on it basically spans around the utility opening. So it protects the existing utility in place.
And for those that may not know, how deep down do the sheet piles typically go when they're installed?
I'd say it's more than twice the length you see above ground.
Quite deep. Okay, thank you. We have a question in the audience.
Hi. So back in 2017, when we had the flood here in the area, one of the topics was that obviously we had debris, different types of debris in the creek line, right here, Santa Clara Street into Olinder, up here by Julian Street. A lot of it was natural debris, like trees that were down, creating their own natural dams, which was a problem. What I learned was that Valley Water has to have a permit to remove the natural debris as well. So do you guys have that easy access? Because those are state permits, correct?
Actually, we have, I believe Devin Modi, or is on the line with our operation and maintenance. Might be able to.
While he's being unmuted, we do have some boards in the back that show who owns which properties in general. So it'll show that the privately owned or municipally owned or owned by Valley Water. So that is a little bit helpful as it relates to permits, but let's hear from Devin, who's our expert on this issue.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, this is Devin Modi with Valley Watersheds Operations and Maintenance Group. Yeah, as far as natural debris is concerned, yes, it is the case that typically it is our practice to try to leave in creeks as much as possible natural debris to keep and sustain habitat for fish and wildlife. If there is a need to remove that debris and it is natural, it is correct that we do have to take stock of how much is being removed, and at some point in the future we have to replace that that which is providing habitat either somewhere on that in that same reach or elsewhere on that creek or in the watershed, and that does require permits. In emergency type situations, we do have a little more flexibility to do the work to the extent it's safe for our crews to do so, but that's generally the approach we take.
Thank you, Devin. Jose, was there another Zoom question?
One thing to add to that, along most of the Coyote Creek, Valley Water doesn't own the land rights to do regular maintenance. And that, as Mike was saying, we do have behind the poster boards that are on the easels, or against the tables there, we have like our land rights map, so you can kind of see. It is a challenge along Coyote Creek where Valley Water doesn't own a lot of the land rights. And so a lot of them are even residential. And so Valley Water can't go in and maintain those parts of the creek outside of an emergency declaration.
Just for general information, within Santa Clara County, Valley Water, possible in Santa Clara County, we own and manage about 280 miles of the more than 500 miles of 800 miles of creeks and waterways. So a pretty small percentage countywide. Another question here?
I have a question about the fact that this project will mitigate a flood that is a 1 in 20 year event. My question is, what would it look like if we had a 1 in 100 year event? Is this helping in any way, or is this just going to be the same we had? And I guess my question is, what we chose to go with the 20 year because obviously for cost reasons. What would have been the cost for 100 year protection versus 20?
Hi, I'm Babani Airpotu. I'm the Deputy Operating Officer overseeing our watershed engineering capital program here at Valley Water. So the 100-year project, it's not something that we've run a cost estimate or a design for recently, but the history of this project from 15, 20 years ago, that I believe, according to the Army Corps of Engineers and the studies that were done before, was going to be close to a $500 million project. These are just numbers that I'm just rattling off my head, but there is some history on the project website that we can get that. So that was way back then. So if you escalate those dollars, I really don't know what it would be. Would there be better designs if we really took a look at it and did a study to see what would a 100-year design look like? We've not done that, but that just gives you a sense of magnitude of what it was going to be. Looks like Katja has some. Okay. And the damage is related to this. With this project, if we had a 100-year event, I don't know if we did that modeling to show we did. Okay.
I think, like I said, Andrew is working on an EAR for this project. So as part of the EAR, one of the requirements is to see what happens to the 100-year floodplain after this project is completed. So the requirement, you cannot change the existing 100-year plain. You cannot make it worse. So we have to make sure, and it all will be described in the EAR that will come out in June or July.
So we'll get a chance to read that in June when that, mid-June when
Yes.
that is released. Okay.
Yep.
Extreme detail, I would bet. Just FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is the agency that's responsible for the mapping for what the 100-year flood is, correct? And where
Yes.
to go.
Yep.
So, as an Arroyo Way resident, the curb across the street from the homes getting flood walls is the 100-year flood line. So just to put that in perspective for folks that have been on that street. So it's quite a bit more water than a 20-year flood. And that map is available on the FEMA website as well, so you can see the updated maps. We got a question across the room.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that, maybe think of something. That made me think of, the question is, similarly, say if there's a 30 or 40-year flood, where is the water going to go over? Where is it going to go? And I think we have a right to know that, like, as soon as possible. Like, is it first going to rush over at Brookwood by Olinder School, or at some different, or is it just going to cause the water to go to San Antonio Bridge and go over there? So for example, yeah, so I know you don't have that answer now, but I think we really deserve to know that answer as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, I don't think we have the answer for that right now, but yeah, we have to run the hydraulic models to see where those breakout questions will be in an event higher than 20 years.
Thank you. We've got another question up front here.
Hi, my name is Patrick. I'm with the CCA. Thanks for coming to the meeting. Appreciate all the community members asking questions about park and access. Do you know how long the passive barriers can be before they become, between the wiper walls, before they become fragile, or can they be infinite?
I don't think nothing is infinite, but the design life is 50 years. But as far as we know, the only thing that we probably need to replace is the seal where the wiper wall.
He's asking how far between, how long can it go without a wiper wall?
The distance between wiper walls, I guess.
Oh,
Because in the park, it looks like it's significant reach.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's not like a really a maximum. Where we have this wiper wall is like wherever there is a change in the grade, like wherever the ground like goes down or goes up. So all those locations we have to have a wiper wall. There's no maximum like 100 feet or 200 feet like that. So
Okay. Well, I guess one consideration for the design and what our volunteers probably would be interested in is how many wiper walls would eventually be put around the park.
yes, yeah, they are being shown there. Most likely they're not going to change. One more thing I want to add is these passive barriers are good. Like I said, like, there's no limitation as long as they're in a straight line. Wherever they change the direction, you've got to have like a wiper. So.
And my follow-up question is, I don't know who we kind of mentioned graffiti and, or, what the materials of flood barriers are. What are the materials on the wiper walls that prevent graffiti? And then part B is more of a city community question. How do we deal with the houseless issue now? And will it return after project's done? And be a problem along the flood barriers?
Yeah, the wiper walls, like Eve was pointing out, like we are trying to match what is there at the entrance of the William Street, basically those cobblestone look. And the other side of the wiper walls where the passive barrier will be, it has to be like a smooth finish. This is like aluminum metal facing. So as for, I think that's probably the only place where it would be an attraction for graffiti or something. And I would let you answer that question.
Thank you. I don't have the report offhand, so I'll get your contact information. Maybe you can share it in the community. The Parks Department and other city departments a month ago, I believe, put out a very, very large report of an action plan. We're under, we've got trying to think of the right terms. We're gonna say we are highly motivated to deal with this issue. So that report talks about the approach we're going to take. One of them that I know of, for example, in the Guadalupe River Park, we've now signed it as a no re-entry zone for camping. And I'm not close enough to the operations issue to tell you tonight that that would occur, but I'm presuming that occurs in all parks. So that's part of it, but I think there's more teeth to the program than signage. I'll be happy to relay that to you.
Thank you. I think we've got a question on Zoom. Jose?
Yes, the question is concrete is not attractive as the creek. The homeowner's been compensated for the degradation of the properties.
Is this for the project phase one?
Okay, so yes, I think I get the question. So where Valley Water is constructing the flood walls through along the creek, like I said, Valley Water doesn't own most of the properties along the creek, and so we need an easement from the homeowner along the creek because the creek is actually in their right of way. Valley Water has compensated the property owner for those easements and for the construction of the flood wall.
And acquired a number of the homes as well. Part of the project.
Yes.
Any other questions in the audience?
Can I just ask add a comment to this?
So we do have a home that will be protected by the flood wall, and in my opinion, my home will have more value where there is a flood wall that protects my property versus, you know, even if I had a view, it's a fantasy to think that you have a great view, but you're now really exposed to a flood event. So I think that's the trade-off. So in my opinion, your house has more value, even though you may have lost the view onto something that it wasn't. I mean, the reality was like you were not protected from a flood, so that's what you had for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the comment. Do one more question. Any more questions triggered from that?
My question goes back to nature, and I'm semi-aware of migrating birds coming through William Street Park, like the swallows, and you got the red-tailed hawks. Is there an environmental impact to those migrating birds?
Well, sure, there is an impact. Construction is happening, it's happening during nesting season. For Project B, which we're preparing the EIR for right now, mitigation for impacts to nesting birds is to do pre-construction survey buffers around nests so that there's adequate distance between construction and nesting birds. So there would have to be a pretty large scale pre-construction survey done in all areas to be impacted by the project. And then there would be buffers drawn around nests to that nesting birds. So that's pretty standard for all construction projects, including Project A, which I can speak to because I've worked with phase one project. That's happening right now. So talk more about that if you want to.
Yeah, we're definitely doing the nesting bird surveys. We have a qualified biologist on site. They do look around and there's even like a birdhouse. Get up and look inside and make sure there's nothing in there. And if we've had nest found, active nest. So the biologist determines based on the species, what the appropriate like no work zone is. And then until they fledge.
Just along those lines, the protection of some of the trees roots as they're being, we have some large beautiful trees. What do you think, what's going on about on the heritage trees over there?
So first, we're trying to find the design that has the least amount of impacts to the trees. but in some cases, trees have had to be removed. And so first, of course, we are mitigating for the trees that we do have to remove. And in some cases, we've pruned or there's been some impact to the tree roots. And so for all of those trees, we're doing a 3-year.
You're talking about project phase 1, right?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm talking about phase 1 right now. But would be the same for phase 2. So for phase 1, where we've had trees that are not removed, but they've been impacted through pruning because of the construction equipment, we've had to prune, or because the roots also they go out very wide. And so we're doing a 3-year tree root monitoring. And that's also required by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so our biologist was monitoring them for 3 years. And
Robert,
Yes.
as it relates to William Street Park, which is the picture up here, these need to go in a straight line. So it looks like that might need another wiper wall there. So would the community rather see a couple additional wiper walls if we could create a pathway that steers clear of the bigger trees? I'm seeing heads nod. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yes.
So as they get to the more finalized design, that'll probably be something that's factored in there.
we've been working very closely with the city and the city's arborists to look at the ways to minimize.
At this point, I don't think we need a wiper wall. We need to redirect the wall. And so what you're seeing, you see more of a right angle there that helps us avoid the very conservative root ball that we're projecting from trained arborists. And we used to look at the canopy of a tree and think, well, the roots stop there. We're giving it a lot more room. So we're clear of that area. We've got a beautiful bay tree on 16th Street that would have some impact from the wiper wall excavation. We're having Valley Water look at that very carefully. The construction contract will zone with an arborist the areas where no vehicles can roll around the trees. We have no compacted roots. And Valley Water has agreed to put in their spec that there will be monitoring of the trees into future years. So if you see any signs of stress, like oak trees starting to get leaves on their bark, we've got a response very quickly on how to deal with that.
I see a follow-up question here.
Well, along that line, in that drawing up there, you see where there's a right angle turn there on the wiper walls. And there is a large oak tree in that angle. And it looks like the current wall is going right next to the canopy.
We looked at the wall very carefully, not this Monday, but the last Monday, and that this plan has been altered. This is conceptual for you, but the engineering drawings we're looking at are being adjusted to avoid that.
That's wonderful.
Typically, how deep would one of these passive barriers need to be? These are not going 20 feet down like the sheet pile walls.
So for most of it's maybe 2 feet or 2.5 feet. But then there's a little key in the middle of it. It goes down a little more, like another 2.5 feet. A total 5, but that the width is just for the last part that goes down is really more of a key. So that's more limited in the width of the excavation.
Fairly shallow compared to the other flood walls.
Correct.
Great. Any additional questions in the audience here? I think Jose had a couple on Zoom.
Yes. Question on Zoom is related to the testing of the passive barriers. Will they be tested regularly, for example, every 6 months, or perhaps the summer before winter begins?
We're still working on what the operation and maintenance requirements will be for the passive barriers. So I can't answer that question. During installation, during construction, they'll be fully tested before they're accepted. So that's all I can say. in terms of frequency of like a full-scale water type testing. I would assume we're not going to be doing full-scale water type testing annually. That'd be probably more of just checking the seals, making sure that the debris hasn't, or cleaning out the debris from inside the grate, and along those lines.
Is there another one?
No, that's it.
From Zoom? Any in the audience? Here we go.
I have a question related to what we're just talking about, but first in follow-up to the passive barriers and the depth that they go. Aren't the majority of tree roots shallow? And so even if it's only 5 feet, couldn't that cause damage if it was too close to the tree?
That is correct.
So that's being taken into account.
Yes.
Okay. The other question I have is, you can find the slide that shows the area around the Coyote Creek classroom. So you can kind of see it there. I don't know if there's one that blows it up a little bigger.
I don't think so, because it's part of a phase 1 project, but it's in yellow.
So,
yeah.
Okay, right where your green pointer was, you see where there's a wall that heads northwest a little. And then it takes a right angle and makes this detour around what is a house, a property. Correct?
Yes.
You see? So since there was a decision made to keep the wall as far away from the creek as possible, why was that? And I should also note that it used to be that they were that northwest wall was going to continue to go straight and hook up to the north side of that property. But more recently that changed, and we were not aware of the change until after construction started and vegetation had been moved. But why was it agreed to build this much longer extension around that property rather than just go straight?
Well, my understanding is that Valley Water was working with the homeowner there and trying to find the best mutually agreeable path forward to construct the flood wall. And what was worked out was, rather than purchase the home from the homeowner, whether or not they were even agreeable to that or not, and then demolish their home and take another home off the market, it was to obtain or acquire an easement from the homeowner and then construct the flood wall around the home. And that project, the first phase was on a very tight, it was on an emergency, under the emergency project of the FERC order as well.
Can you tell us when that decision was made? To go around instead of going straight? So as
we
much as
can get back to you on the.
we first moved in like 19 years ago, the plan was to go, well, maybe not 19, but for a long time, the plan was for it to go straight. My understanding now is that it's up for sale. And the sale price is in line with what Valley Water had offered the owner. So it just makes, it's a little confusing to us what happened there. And it seems like from the standpoint of wildlife, you know, they're left with a very narrow little alleyway between the back of that house and the creek.
Right, I think you're referring to a project that's already in construction right now, and
Well, it started in February.
That's correct, and it's a project already that's been awarded in construction. The 19-year-old, we can't speak to that, but this project was being done much later. Like I mentioned, the 19-year ago project evaluation was based on a different objective of 100-year flood protection and all. So the project design has changed significantly since then.
But only in the last year, I would say as little as a year ago, it was supposed to go straight. And it changed, and you started construction in February, but supposedly the owner's been wanting to sell that property for a couple of years.
We can get back about the specifics of that, but in general, when we try to do the designs, we try to do the minimum impact and try to stay on valley water properties as much as possible with the least minimum damage that we can do, and that was the case here. That I would presume that that was the decision point of creating the minimum, like the least project cost alternative with the least amount of damage and least amount of easements we'll have to acquire, if you will.
Any other questions in the audience? Jose, any on Zoom? See one here.
Again, I have a request. Can you overlay, not tonight, the FEMA flood map or a flood map, 100-year flood map, 20-year flood map? And the reason I'm got a big question around is if I'm looking at this right, there's no barriers east of the Mississippi or east of Coyote. And that's where the flood goes naturally over to 101.
So don't know how far the east side was impacted on the Olinder neighborhood during the 2017 flood.
Big deal. Big problem.
But the part of the way the water traveled was in the streets and through the storm sewers. Is that right? So the goal of this meeting we're here at is to keep the water in the park and out of the homes.
The eastern part of Coyote, like in the Roosevelt neighborhood. The eastern part, it does have an uphill. So, and then there's another creek, I believe it's the Stevens Creek or not Stevens Creek, Silver Creek. And so right at like 30th Street and like Short Ridge area in Portugal, it takes another route. So it's not Coyote.
There are some flood protection elements right there at where Lower Silver Creek comes into Coyote Creek.
Where the Eggo factory is, right? So that's on the beach 5 part. At the very beginning, you covered several of those. There you go. So those are getting concrete flood walls.
This is the
industrial, and then the park as well on the other side, and residential. And then you'll notice as well, across the creek from Roosevelt Park, there are 2 proposed flood walls as well.
So we actually live near, right here where you're discussing the Roosevelt Park area across on the other side. And we've been working with the team. They've been out to our house several times because this wall is going to impact our property. And we're on 20th Street in Roosevelt where they connect on Julian. So the flood does come about 15 feet. We almost had to vacate property. But we don't know yet what exactly are your plans. I know you want to stay away from wildlife and the aesthetics of the creek, but how far is the wall going to come up? They've told us that they're going to put the wall right through our backyard. So I don't know. That's why we're here tonight.
Thank you for that question.
Mohammed, would you like to come up as well, or we can? I think the design is still being finalized and looked at. So that flood wall particularly was it was a wall or a flood protection element that came out during the environmental EIR analyses. And so out of all the flood protection elements, those are the least furthest along the design. And so those ones, I think we're still, we are still looking at those ones closely and trying to figure out exactly what is needed and where the best location is. So these are still somewhat schematic. I think maybe you've met with Mohammed. Yeah, so yeah, those ones, apologies that we don't have like a concrete answer for that yet. More to come. We'll talk with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking up. Any other questions in the audience?
So this question is kind of very high level, and I apologize because maybe most of the people in here already know the answers to this. If so, I'm happy to take it offline. But if you were to go back towards the kind of beginning of the presentation, where we showed a timeline with that had a whole bunch of light blue lines going horizontally across the chart, and it was talking about all there. Thank you. I can't really read that well, but my question goes to the bigger picture of when Anderson Dam, when that's going to be completed, and what effect will that have? For example, once that's completed, does that negate the need for any of this flood work? Or is it still needed in addition to what's being done to Anderson Dam? That's kind of question one. And then the second one is, like, when is that supposed to be completed? Just overall, how much of an effect is that going to have?
It's a very good question. So yes, the 20-year flood protection is for some, and the reason why the first phase, the reason why the project was phased was because there's different flow volumes corresponding with that February 2017 flood rain event. And so when the Anderson Dam tunnel becomes operational, that's one condition, and that's for risk reduction measures that Valley Water is required to do as part of the emergency work. And then when the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project gets underway, they need to divert all of the water, and that's where there's additional, because the dam will be taken down. And so that's where the Anderson Dam Stage 2 diversion tunnel, there's even greater flows, volume coming down the creek, corresponding with that 2017 February flood event. Once Anderson Dam, the seismic retrofit is completed and Anderson Dam is back online, maybe you can do the date better than me, when that's anticipated. 2032, oh, it's on the screen here. A completion in 2032. Then there will be some additional capacity because there will be less water coming through, but these flood protection elements are still necessary even after that, and especially during the construction.
Just for illustration purposes, the reservoir outlet has been open for the last several years. So it's essentially a dead pool. And it was during the drought at December, it was at dead pool. And then we had the rainy January, February, and March, and it was at 55%. It then took 80 to 90 days to get back down to zero. So the outlet we have right now does not reduce the level of the reservoir very quickly, and it doesn't put very much water in a flood sense in the creek. But with the larger outlet as a part of this new project, there will be much more water able to go in the creek more often. So the flood measures are needed because it will be coming. It may not be because of a storm event, it may be because, or in advance of a storm event. Did I say that right, engineers? From the poli sci guy. So I think that generated a couple more questions.
My concern would be how the banks are gonna hold up. We have had a lot of people digging in the banks. Someone even put a door in rooms, it's like that. And I'm very concerned when we add extra pressure on those banks, what will happen to the creek?
So, I guess you're talking about the design itself. Are we designing on a solid base if we are going to put our flood walls? Very good question. We certainly do take care of the creek banks if we are driving the sheet piles into there. Going forward beyond that, though, the maintenance part of the levees, all of I can't think of this particular section having any tunnels dug in. I may be wrong, but we'll be doing those. No, our team's saying that there are not. There are other levees that have had that, but not this particular. Watson Park, they do. Okay.
I think I'm really talking about the creek in general, not just what we're doing now. But as Anderson Dam is putting out more volume, what is going to happen and this may be a future discussion, but I'd like it to be looked at carefully. It's a problem in the making.
Right, and I think. Yeah.
But also, I think erosion in
Erosion,
the creek side.
actual, okay, it's not the unhoused, yeah, yeah, we do conduct creek inspections and then once the flood wall is built, it'll be part of our operations and maintenance as well to manage that and then keep an ongoing maintenance along those creeks.
Fine, so look at the question.
One quick lightning round question.
This is for the engineers. Okay. So it took 3 months for the dam, current Anderson Dam, after all the rain, 3 months to drain from 55%. If that should happen next year, when the Anderson Dam tunnel is open, how long will it take to drain?
I think right now, like Mike said, the capacity is 500 CFS, meaning like
500 cubic feet per second.
500 cubic feet per second. What it means is like basically 500 step balls coming out of that, just draining the Anderson. But once this tunnel project is done next year, so the capacity would increase to 2,500 CFS, meaning like 5 times more capacity. So it can drain lower reservoir level much faster.
And thank you all for so many fantastic questions. I think what we'd like to do is make sure we get to exit the community center on time because they're ready to close. But if you have additional questions, we're happy to stay and answer them. We're going to conclude this portion and the Zoom portion of our meeting. And just a reminder, we will be coming together tomorrow. I have a script here. Coming together tomorrow for a Zoom meeting where we can continue this exciting dialogue. And if you think of a new question tonight that I should have asked that, you'll have your chance tomorrow. We have some materials about our water supply master plan and capital improvement program that are at the front table, as well as a project shell. And a reminder that our draft EIR meeting will be this summer in June we're targeting the Olinder Neighborhood Center for that meeting. And a recording will be uploaded to our project webpage in the next couple of days. If you have any questions, Jose Villarreal, who's right in front, is our community liaison for this project, and his contact information is on that shell. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and we'll conclude our meeting.